Creative Assembly is continuing their rampage here with another reveal today. We got the Norsca roster reveal as well as the cinematic trailer. On today's video, we will be going through the Norsca roster as seen from the reveal stream that they did, as well as a lot of the information that's on the Steam page. So if you don't have it already, I'm going to put a link to it in the description here. Go to the Steam page. It has a ton of information. It's going to go through pretty much everything I'm talking about right now. On top of that, we're going to go through the at the end of this video, for those that have already seen it, I don't want to put it in the beginning, but at the end of this video, we'll just quickly go through the cinematic. It's only about a minute and a half long, so there's not going to even be much to talk about from a lore perspective because a lot of what they're doing with Norsca is brand new. We did see a mini kind of roster for them in a White Dwarf once upon a time, but there's never been an official army book for Norsca. There's always been the opposition of Norsca for the Empire, Chaos, and for the Dark Elves. It's very important to note that the Norskins fill a lot of the northern Nagaroth, I don't want to say plains, but frigid wastelands. It's to the north. I mean, Marathai comes up and she just seduces all of these Norskins all the time. Like there's a lot of times in lore where you read where she is at the head of a giant Norscan army of chieftains that she seduced and so on and so forth. So they do play a very large role in the history of Warhammer. We've just never seen them as their own race until now. So it's very exciting to see this because they're going to have a lot of unique mechanics. Here's some that are directly from the Steam page here, but they'll be able to basically erect for deities, not deities, but monoliths to their gods. They've got the eagle, crow, serpent, and hound. And rather than raising a settlement or occupying or looting it, they can raise it and then erect this monolith. So the more monoliths that are actually up, the more in favor of the gods, and the rewards are increased as per those monoliths. So we don't really know, of course, what those are, but maybe that's unique units or characters, so on and so forth. Also, they do have a new mechanic called monster hunting, and this is basically when the monster hunter skill is unlocked in the tech tree, a Norsca faction gains access to the monstrous arcanum. Now, here's pretty important. They did a book in the in Warhammer called Winds of Magic. I believe it's actually called Winds of Magic. My head might be all over the place right now because there's so much shit going into it from all this. It's so awesome. But basically, in the Winds of Magic, it's basically just sorcerers against sorcerers, and they can summon beasts. And they cover pretty much every single beast, monstrous beast for that matter, in the Warhammer world. So what this happens is that this ancient tomb lists the mightiest beasts and monsters to roam the world. The player may then choose to initiate hunts, embarking on multi-stage quests, which culminate in battles against these legendary creatures. Once defeated, they may bestow legendary trophies which the player may equip his characters with. In certain cases, the monsters themselves may be brought to heal and recruited for use in battle. So maybe that's a way that we can get the Ice Worm, which we'll see is a unit in the Norscan roster list. So I'm very interested to see that. Also, sorry, it's a frost worm, but there's a new frostbite mechanic as well, and this is going to be kind of like an aura that's going to have certain units. So the Norscan ice wolves, the ice trolls, it's a passive ability, and what it's going to do is slow units that are engaged in melee with that unit. But it's also going to make it so that they're easier to run down, because that's going to be one of the biggest issues with Norskins. They're going to have a low leadership, so they're not going to want to have as many units on the field as far as their opposition has, because they don't want to have to deal with that negative penalty if they come back and get like they've rallied from routing and get a rear charge in on some Norskins. Even if they're winning, that could fucking topple them because they're Norskins. Also, just like Bretonnia is going to has that mechanic where they can unify all of Bretonnia, Norsca can confederate all of its various tribes. And we've covered this a lot in the Norscan videos, as well as Throg and Wolfric, which will be linked at the end of this video. Don't worry about that. We'll have it there for you. So that way at least you can have an idea of some of the stuff we've already covered on this. But and another last big mechanic for the Norskins is that there is going to be the ability to have outposts, very similar to what's it called, Wood Elves, where they can secure major faction capitals and erect outposts within them. So you can fully develop the Norscan settlements outside of Norsca, which is pretty huge, because in Total War Warhammer 1, we know we are limited in which settlements can be captured by who. This says ownership of these cities also enables you to plunder the secrets of their original owners, unlocking unique new technologies to research. So maybe there's going to be something unique with magic-oriented stuff in Altdorf, or maybe in Nuln you get some sort of benefit to. There's not really any actual gunpowder or artillery in the Norscan army, so it leads me to believe that you'll at least get something cool from that. But we do have some legendary lords here as well. We've all been wanting it. We've all been, posting about it, and we got it. Wulfric the Wanderer. He's going to be one of the legendary lords for the Mighty Norscan faction. So he's going to fill a lot of the same roles that he fills in tabletop. He's going to be a duelist. He's going to be able to lock down champions by essentially pinning them and reducing their armor and defense. But he's pretty much going to be able to target characters in crowds. He will have mounts as well, which is unique. He did not have that in tabletop. But he's a really great character with a lot of amazing lore. He's able to execute amazing insults to enemy factions in their native tongue, even though he might not be, a practitioner of it, because he's a human and doesn't want to. And humans don't typically speak Dwarvish, but he does it a lot of times. I'm sorry about that. A lot of times in the lore here, but he's going to have a siege tacker attribute as well, so he doesn't need to actually go through the siege process when it comes to laying siege to other towns, settlements, capitals. When I say that, I'm saying that he doesn't have to set up siege engines or siege weapons. He can actually just go right for it. Also, it says all mammoth units in his army gain bonus melee attack. All Marauder units enjoy reduced upkeep costs, and every unit in his retinue causes fear, which is pretty amazing. A lot of people were having a lot of speculation. A lot of people had a lot of speculation about Seafang, his ship, his fabled ship. They're saying that will be in the game, but very much in the same way that what's his name for Bretonnia will have the Gentleman of Aquitaine has his trident. Seafang will be a far-reaching wind attack, is what it says. So basically, it sounds like it will be a line capability, hopefully doing more damage than the trident of Aquitaine there, because that thing is just a letdown. But we do have Throg as the other legendary lord, which is an amazing choice here. Really, really cool, because in the lore, he's like the smartest troll, and he has a lot of character in tabletop. He's a very worthwhile character as far as his points go. I think he's only like 130, 140 points, and for a special character with the amount of abilities that Throg has, it's pretty amazing. But so Throg will be the kind of a brawler type character. He's going to be a monster. I mean, after all, it is a troll, but he will have, of course, no mount options. And before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm sorry about that. Wulfric will have the options for a Chaos Steed, a Chaos Chariot, and a War Mammoth. Throg, of course, will have no mounts, but he will regenerate a lot faster than normal trolls, so that's pretty amazing. He does have a whole kind of quest line and quest chain around that, and legendary items as the king of trolls, so it'll be very cool to see that, because we will see a reduced upkeep to trolls and ice troll units, and units in Throg's army in general will be immune to all forms of attrition, because they talk about how Throg lives in like the frigid troll wasteland, troll country, and how it's always really hard to get to him, and how he attacks in and out of the snow and blizzards. So it makes sense. It's very lore and flavorful type of choices that Creative Assembly has made. But he also grants a physical resistance buff to all troll and ice troll units faction wide. So maybe with Norsca we'll finally be able to see trolls enter in a very strong competitive meta for Total War Warhammer. They've always kind of been one of those, oh, you chose armored trolls? Well, that's funny kind of choices in my mind, especially just the non-armored one. Their leadership is just so damn piss poor. But one thing that he will have as well is a unique building called the Cave of the Rocky Throne, and that grants a buff to troll units faction wide. And he has access to a troll. I'm sorry, I guess a troll magic missile of sorts called a Copious Vomit, and we could talk about this here. It's a ranged armor-piercing attack. So we do get the first hint of breath weapons coming in. We'll see more later in the roster here. But it doesn't mention whether or not he has Frostbite. That's a new mechanic that they've added that we've just talked about, but I'm wondering if that'll be in here as well. So that kind of takes care of the the 2 legendary lords, some of the unique characteristics of Norsca, but we also have a new mechanic called Rage. Rage and Berserk, there's 2 different types, but they have, basically, they come in 3 stages. They increase melee attack, leadership, and damage the longer the unit is in combat. Berserk increases it faster and is only applicable to certain units, whereas the entire army, of course, already has Rage. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we're going to start to get the taste of things like murderous prowess, martial prowess, and the rampage mechanic, all being specific to the new Total War Warhammer 2 factions. We're going to get a taste of that with the new rage mechanic in Norsca. So they were saying that Norsca is going to have a lot of the elements that we're going to be used to in Total War Warhammer 2. Here it is right here. We're going to have these faction specific. We're going to have some breath attacks. We're going to have this and that. Units being able to capture any settlement. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out, because I'm very excited for Total War Warhammer 2, if you can't tell by the sound of my voice. So we'll jump on over to the only lord that the Norscans have is the Marauder Chieftain. He can mount a Chaos Steed, Chaos Chariot, or a War Mammoth. A lot of customization here. So he can be dedicated to specific Chaos gods. Norscans worship the Chaos Pantheon in a different kind of way than Chaos cultists or warriors do. The Hound could possibly be seen as Khorne. You can devote your Chaos Chieftain to the Hound and he gets the Berserk mechanic. So we don't really know what exactly. I mean, if I'm taking a look at, as I scroll back up to look at it, Eagle, Crow, Serpent, and Hound, we could easily say that each one of those represent a certain one. Maybe Crow is Slaanesh, or probably Serpent would be more Slaanesh. Hound would be Khorne. Crow, maybe they would be Nurgle, because, I don't know, birds are fucking disease-ridden creatures. And Eagle would maybe be Tzeentch, because eagles are all-seeing, and that's kind of how Tzeentch works. He's all-seeing, changer of ways, kind of knows the future, the past, and the present. But we'll get into more on Tzeentch and Nurgle in the upcoming Chaos Pantheon videos. But the Chieftain here, he does have a lot of unique skill trees. Let's see here, enabling. I'm trying to catch if I can catch anything that I missed from my first go around here. But yeah, they were saying that each one of his specializations in his skill tree is aligned to those 4 Norscan gods. That will then change how he is as a chieftain. So rather than having 4 separate lords, we basically have one lord that's got four skill trees that are going to dictate him 4 separate routes. So we'll jump on over here now to the hero choices. And we've got 3 new, really cool ones. We've got the Skinwolf Werekin, which is, finally we get it, a werewolf. I hope we don't get anything like that movie with Kate Beckinsale, where there's werewolves and vampires all over the place. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's going to come to me as I keep talking, I'm sure. But Skinwolf Werekin, they are werewolves, of course. But it's basically a marauder that has been afflicted with lycanthropy, the disease of werewolves. And they hunt in packs, was what the gentleman was saying during the live stream. So they're kind of more anti-large, is what he had hinted at without outright saying it. But they do have 2 pretty unique characteristics. And as I read the Steam notes, it says anti-large focused warriors. But the 2 unique characteristics is their physical resistance as well as their regeneration. So this is going to allow them to really kind of stay in combat without having a large amount of melee armor or defense, because they said that the werekins themselves won't have it, but they do have an armored variant that we'll get to later. But that's the werekin here. So that's your kind of your combat lord, or I'm sorry, combat hero in the Norscan army. Then we have the shaman sorcerer. They didn't go into what lores that they have access to. They were saying it has more lores than the Famir Balefiend, but as I look at the Steam notes, the Steam page, because I have my notes and the Steam notes up at the same time here, the Steam notes are saying lores of death, metal, and fire. So this is basically just your jack of all trades type magician, a standard kind of squishy magician that we've seen in a lot of other factions. The Steam notes say that there's no weakling mages here, but I don't think they're going to be too crazy. They do gain melee attack improvements and may be mounted on chariots, as they said. I didn't actually hear him talk about any of the mount options for the heroes, but I'm looking at the notes and it says Chaos Steed and Marauder Chariot for the Shaman Sorcerer. but the Famir Balefiend and Skinwolf Werekin are on foot exclusively. So but does bring me over to the Famir Balefiend here. So it's kind of a reptilian race. They live in the marshes up in Norsca. So there'll be a whole new look onto everything. I'm not very familiar with them, to be totally honest with you guys. I know this very few times that I don't know how to speak to something, but they're a reptilian race living in the marshes. They're going to be another set of magic casters, but they're going to have a Sunder armor mechanic. They're going to have magic attacks. They're going to be really good in melee. They're also saying that the Shaman Sorcerer will have melee as well. So with an army centered on melee and its rage mechanic and berserk mechanic, these all make sense. But the Famir Balefiend is a little bit of a hybrid, because he is going to be magic and melee at the same time. So a bit of a dual role as it is. But he does have an access to a number of lores, and that is shadows and fire. I was hoping that was going to be a new lore, but alas, 'tis not. So we've done now the heroes, we've done the lords, we've done a little bit about the mechanics. Let's jump on over to the melee infantry. We do have a lot of options here, and I'm going to kind of go through my list, and I'm going to go through a little bit of what the Steam page says, because the Steam page actually says the straight up mechanics that are going to be in the game, which is pretty huge. So we've got Marauders, and we have a variant of them with shields, and a variant of them with spears and with great weapons. And there's good more than that, but I want to break them apart here. So just your standard infantry unit is going to be Marauders with shields, Marauders with spearmen, and Marauders with great weapons. And so they're going to have their charge and slash bonus against large if they have spearmen, of course. But all Marauders have rage except for the Berserkers, who have berserk. And Marauders all will have the ability to hide in forests. So they're going to have not that same sense that the Wood Elves do, but they're going to be pretty strong in forests, is what that tells me. Of course, with the great weapons, you're going to get your AP characteristics and be able to fight down any kind of pesky northern dwarves or any kind of great weapons you come up against. Great swords you come up against. But we do now have this is just the infantry we're going to stick with. The Marauder Berserkers. So they're going to have the Berserk mechanic, which is basically a faster growing rage mechanic, as we've said. They're going to be immune to psychology, and they're going to have frenzy. So they're going to have no fear, as I was saying. They're going to be very fast. Possibly an anti-infantry mechanic. This doesn't obviously tell us in any of the notes so far, but there's got dual axes, so they're just going to be really probably awesome looking guys. I'm picturing a very Norse berserker, which is, for the most part, has a wolf head on his head and he's completely naked with 2 axes. That is like the Norse image of a berserker. If it's not, I won't be disappointed. Not all the time do you need to see flopping Marauder dong, but it is what it is. Then with our Marauder champions, we have 2 kind of variants as well. Marauder champions, just kind of standard definition standard edition, heavy armor that can hide in forests again with rage. But then you've got your Marauder champions that have great weapons. So you got your AP characteristics being factored onto them as well. They are going to be the heavy infantry. They're actually the only one in the Norscan roster that can act as an anvil. So this is going to be the unit that's going to be up against your Grave Guard, that's going to be holding the line here, or the Phoenix Guard in the future, or it's just going to be the one thing that's going to be your main staying force in your army. I hope to think that they're going to have a little more leadership than the rest of the Marauders, but we'll see how that really kind of pans out. Now, moving to the missile infantry, we do have Marauder hunters and hunters with javelin. Marauder hunters with javelins, Marauder hunters with throwing axes. And the throwing axes, standard one we already know. That's going to be your armor piercing foot infantry, armor piercing missile infantry. And then you've got your javelins, which are going to be your armor piercing anti-large infantry. Both having rage, both having hide and force, of course. But now that we've kind of covered on the infantry, we can start to move over to the cav. And, the cavalry is one of my favorite options. As you guys like to say, I do pronounce it really funky. Sometimes it's cavalry, sometimes it's calvary to me. Depends on how I want to say it that second. But we do have the missile infantry in the Marauder hunters with javelins and the Marauder hunters with... that was just the missile infantry. The cavalry that we do have is the Marauder chariot and the Marauder ice wolf chariot. Now, they did talk about this having 2 real different mechanics with those chariots. The ice wolf chariot is going to be a hybrid melee ranged chariot. throwing axes with Norscan wolves that kind of act more as an anti-infantry, and also it's going to have frostbite. Whereas your Marauder Chariot is just your kind of cheapest variant stepping stone. It's going to have the ranged ability of the throwing axes, but it's just going to be your standard chariot unit. So nothing over the top or crazy here. Now we do have, of course, more of cav options in that we have some little beasties here. We have some Norscan Warhounds, some Ice Wolves, and these are going to be missile resistant, I'm assuming because of their hide, but they're just going to be your standard Warhound unit. But the Ice Wolves in specific will have frostbite and they will cause fear. So this is going to be a great unit that's going to be able to muck up opposing cavalry. You've got a unit of Altdorf Griffites that's charging in. You can use them to kind of lock them down, or you can get in the back line of their their artillery or their archery and really start to harass some units there. So lightly armored, fast, they function very effectively as the harassment unit for the Norscans. And of course, your bind up tar pit unit. Now with the actual melee cav, we have three kind of variations, three flavors here. Just typical Marauder Horsemen. And they're going to have the ability to fire while moving, of course. This is different than the Marauder Hunters, like we were saying. These units are actually going to be on horseback, as I'm distinguishing here. But they're going to be able to fire while moving, and they're going to have Vanguard deployment. We also have the Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes as well to add that AP characteristic. Now, lastly, we do have one important unit of melee cav is the Marauder Horse Masters. So this is the Norscan version of basically your chaos cavalry, but with that rage mechanic. So they can cycle charge, but they need to keep their rage high, so they need to stay in that melee, or else they're not going to be able to keep their rage as static. But we'll move on over to the monstrous infantry now, and we do have the skin wolves, as we've heard from what we've seen so far. And these guys have just the same kind of mechanic as their hero counterpart, the Werekin. They're going to have that physical resistance, they're going to have that regeneration, but they are going to be lightly armored, they're going to be fast, and they're going to function essentially like medium cavalry. They're going to really, preferred target is really even medium armor themselves. They don't have high armor because they are lightly armored. There is a variant with armor as though, and that armor sacrifices mobility for speed, of course, or I'm sorry, sacrifices mobility and speed to be a more perpetual combat cav unit. So you've got the ability to kind of ride through with the skin wolves without armor because they are frenzied as well, but then you've got the skin wolves with armor that will be able to really stay the line. And these units, of course, cause fear. Them being giant werewolves, one would expect they do cause fear. We do have two other units that kind of mirror their hero counterparts in the Famir Warriors. And these guys, you do have one option with great weapons, one without. They're slow moving, they're heavily armored. They do have a new mechanic called From the Mists. They're surrounded by swirling mists that make them harder to hit. We're not really sure if that just melee defense harder to hit, or is it a range defense harder to hit, or both. But they do their armor sundering and magic attack from their hero counterpart as well. So they're a pretty cool unit with their skin wolves as well. And I like the fact that we're going to see a lot of monstrous units in the Norscan army. We've already talked about the Warhounds and the Ice Wolves, now the Skin Wolves and the Famir Warriors, but there is the Norscan Trolls and Ice Trolls as well as the Feral Manticore. And the Norscan Trolls sound like they're just going to be your standard troll that we've seen already in some of the other Chaos and Greenskin and lists of the sort, but just more of a Norscan flavor probably. But the Ice Trolls are ice trolls. They have clubs made of ice. They've got that frostbite mechanic, so they really can lock units in place and really hold the line. But they do have a cool breath weapon that we're going to see as well, that it's going to allow them to shoot essentially ice shards out of their mouths. So I'm really stoked to see them. Regeneration standard on both troll units. But then lastly, for the monsters and beasts, really, we do have the Feral Manticore. And that's just like the Warriors of Chaos / Beasts of Chaos Manticore, your mid-tier kind of flying unit. But we do have now the coup de grace of the list in the Norscan Giant, who's going to be one of your siege attackers. It's going to cause fear. It's going to cause terror. And as you would expect, it is a giant, so it's a character killer. It can just path right through infantry. It's going to be hard hitting. It's going to be a monster on the battlefield. But we do have a feral mammoth. Now, a feral manticore and the feral mammoth are going to start playing off of this mechanic we're going to see in Total Warhammer 2 in the Lizardmen, in the Dark Elves, who have their feral counterparts, a lot of their higher tier monsters. We're going to see these as well. They were saying that, you know, like the feral mammoth is really terrifying and really intimidating. It's actually a monster truck, as he put it, but it's the biggest unit in the game at the moment, and but he said, though, if it gets isolated, it can break fast. So we're going to see, of course, not the rampage mechanic that we're going to see from Total Warhammer 2, but we're going to see the feral having kind of a dynamic where you have to babysit them a little bit more. You have to micro them a little bit better so they don't get isolated and just kind of routed off the table quickly. But they're very anti-infantry. They just literally sweep infantry aside. You do have two other variants outside of the War Mammoth. One just being a standard, outside of the feral mammoth, is just a standard war mammoth. It's got a big platform on its back, kind of like Lord of the Rings, but it's got anti-large javelins that are going to do kind of skirmishing level harassment damage, but it's very, very heavily armored. It's going to already have its anti-infantry mechanic. It's just not going to not have to worry about it isolating as much because it is going to be so heavily armored, and it is going to be able to really kind of bring the noise, as they say. But we do have kind of a linchpin kind of anchor unit of the army as well, and that's a war mammoth with a war shrine. So kind of a claw of Nagash kind of grail relic type feel to it. It's going to improve the leadership, and it's going to also improve the benefits of the rage of the units around it. So it's got two abilities: Favor of the Ruinous and Giver of Glory. Giver of Glory is going to target a single unit and increase its leadership with higher tiers of rage. So the higher its rage, the more leadership it's going to get. And the Favor of the Ruins is obviously going to be the constant buff it's going to have things around it. This causes fear and it causes terror. All of these units cause fear and terror. The giant, the mammoths, and the last one here we're going to jump into is the Frost Verm. And that's similar to a Chaos Dragon. It even looks exactly like Galrock, but it's going to have a chilling aura, which is going to be really cool. It's the same kind of aura that the Hex Wraiths have, but it also has its Frostbite mechanic as well. And it's focused on... the Frostborn itself is really focused on controlling the pace and speed of battle. And that's what they were saying as a whole, that the Norscan army list is going to be like. It's going to be controlling every little aspect of what you're doing on the battlefield. So I'm really excited to see how this army really plays out. I think it's got a lot of really cool options and a lot of things that are very unique and different to Total War that we haven't seen. We haven't seen an army that's so heavily weighted like this with a lot of character. I mean, to be totally honest, I mean, that whole rage mechanic is going to be very different and very interesting. We don't usually see that in the campaign, or I'm sorry, we usually see that on the campaign map and not in the actual battle screen. So it's going to be fun to play around with. But that kind of rounds up the roster here. I'm going to do a quick little bit right now on the actual cinematic trailer, so stick around for that if you'd like. After the video, if you want to jump to the very end, we do have links to the lore blurbs on Throg as well as Wulfric, and we'll also do one on the Norscan that I covered as well. So go ahead and jump over there if you like, guys. But here will be the actual cinematic trailer. This is not actual gameplay footage, as much as I wish it was.
We seek the monsters that you fear the most. We chase.
So opening up right here, we have obviously a Chaos Dragon. Not Galrock, but it looks damn near similar to him because he got two heads.
The nightmares that haunt your cowardly dreams.
This is a goblin, if you can't tell from the fact that he probably looks like he smells.
The deadlier the
and then,
prey,
just like any good Arachnarok spider should be, fucking dead.
in the hunt, the more we honor our gods.
Some dwarves that probably just didn't deserve this.
Breeds the savage, and we revel in it. The old world calls.
And we get our first taste of the man himself.
Ripe for
Just gonna dull his sword. I don't know what he's thinking. We do have the mighty Wulfric here. I find myself a little turned on. You guys probably share my sentiments. Who knows?
And we became them.
Just such a good fucking trailer. war mammoths in the back, obviously. There wasn't a ton, obviously, to go here, but it was only a minute and a half. Wanted to definitely show it off. Such a good, well-done trailer. One thing that's kind of cool here is he does have his little wolf. Maybe they say that his retinue will cause fear, so maybe he'll have a small retinue of ice wolves. In some of the other editions of Warhammer, we've seen characters with actual wolves that accompany them into battle. So it wouldn't completely surprise me if they did that, and I think it'd be a really cool kind of little button on Norsca as a whole to have him kind of controlling some ice wolves. But anyway, guys, that kind of completes everything here. Like I was saying, we'll have some goodies at the end of the video if you want to dive more into the Norscan lore. If you have any other questions, though, please feel free to comment, or if there's things that you saw or heard that I'd missed, please let me know. I'm always big on making sure that as much information stays within the community. But that's all for today, guys. Have a good one and take care.